shippers can just not ship. They can wait this out.
They can just stop,
Yeah,
They
and
can just give up.
That, of course, is not
That's
the
what I
answer.
do. Whenever things are tough, I just give up.
Just give up. We're
stop.
done.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Shifting Gears. My name's Greyson Harris. I'm here with our Director of Air Cargo, Mr. Carson Sharp. We are here to talk to you guys today about really the state of shipping in the Middle East and the Red Sea. Obviously, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of things going on that will affect the freight world as well as just global politics, economy. We'll stick mainly just to freight and shipping. Obviously, that's our lane. We don't go out of our lane too much if we can help it. So a little backstory on how we got here. The overall story of it is in Yemen, the Houthi rebels that are basically condemning a lot of the conflict between Israel, Palestine, Gaza Strip, all that stuff. Part of what they're doing is they set out to attack container ships that they believed were linked to Israel. That was the overall story of it. But as we dive into the timeline of it, it gets a little bit more detailed, and obviously there's a lot more context to it. Starting back in October is when the Red Sea stuff really started to gain a little bit of traction as it moved a little bit away from some of the Gaza Strip conflict and then towards the Red Sea. Back in October, Houthis began firing land attack cruise missiles and drones from Yemen, reportedly targeting Israel. So that's really where it kicked off and started. They vowed then to basically continue to do that until Israeli aggression stopped. Back in November of 2023, we start to see our first container ships and first commercial vessels being attacked and targeted. Now we start moving into December. Overall, throughout December, we had close to 12 to 15 commercial vessels attacked, and all of these are rough estimates because depending on the source, it really depends on who you're looking at, who you're getting your news from. On December 3rd, Houthis fired ballistic missiles at 3 commercial vessels in the Red Sea. The Unity Explorer, which is a British-owned and operated bulk carrier, Number 9, which is a British-owned and operated container ship, and then the Sophie II, which is a Japanese-owned and operated bulk carrier. So at this point, there aren't really any apparent Israeli ties here. They're just attacking.
And that's the hard part for a lot of people to understand is they are claiming that these vessels are sending aid to the Israelis. And
Correct.
Of course, as you mentioned, this is in response to the Israel-Palestine war. So the Houthis are claiming all these vessels are going to aid Israel. And, to be honest, I don't know if they would be as impactful as they have been if they weren't geographically situated right near the entrance to the Red Sea, which in the northern part of the Red Sea, you have the Suez Canal.
Yeah, exactly. This all leads up to disruptions and total avoidance, essentially, of the Suez Canal, which is what is turning this from a regional conflict into more of a global one. So as we continue through December here, December 18th, the U.S. established Operation Prosperity Guardian. It's a multinational initiative focused on security in the Red Sea. So now we've got government interference and actual plans and mandates here to take care of the problem. The next day, several other countries did pretty much the exact same thing. So in December, we've got nations taking a stand and saying, no, this is enough. You guys are getting a little wild here. We need to wrangle this in. In January, though, it didn't really seem to stop that much. There were as much as somewhere between 9 and 12 commercial vessels attacked throughout the month of January. January 1st was when Iran parked a warship in the Red Sea and had it kind of floating around for a while. The mission itself was not specified. Why does it matter that Iran was there? Well, there are speculations. Now, this has been denied by Iran, but there are speculations that they basically have backed the Houthis, either through equipment or money or economic support, whatever the case may be, that there is some back channeling support between Iran and the Houthi rebels. So that's why them moving in a warship into the Red Sea on January 1st was noteworthy because, now we're starting to wonder how much more could this grow? On January 10th, the 26th Houthi attack, which was also the largest to date, involved 21 UAVs and 18 missiles. All of them were intercepted, so it didn't seem to matter very much. But it shows, again, that they have legitimate firepower and a lot of determination to keep this going, regardless of whether or not their original intentions are still their intentions today. It doesn't seem to be slowing them down necessarily a whole lot. Even as we move into this month, February, and as of recording is February 9th. 3 days ago, as a matter of fact, 2 more commercial vessels were attacked by Houthis in the Red Sea, so it's still going. And because the threat is still there, you've got major shipping companies saying, okay, it might be time to reconsider what we're doing here until this blows over.
That's hugely impactful, of course, for our industry specifically, but not just our industry will be impacted. I mean, supply chain, as we've mentioned, eventually will impact everybody at the retail level.
So some of the biggest names in shipping took their name out of the hat when it comes to Red Sea transits. Companies like Maersk, Hapag-Lloyd, MSC, CMA CGM, Hafnia, Torm, Stena Bulk. These are some of the biggest names in shipping, and they said, okay, well, obviously going through the Red Sea is not worth the threat of having our cargo attacked or straight up stolen, because there have also been piracy instances as well where they just straight up took the ship and all the cargo, or even had hostages, as you saw like in one of the first instances.
Yeah.
So what is the overall impact then of avoiding the Red Sea and, most importantly, the Suez Canal? Well, a lot. Suez Canal and the Panama Canal, those are the only 2 canals that the average everyday person can just think of. And that's because they are incredibly important. Now, not even to mention, of course, that the Panama Canal has its own issues right now, weather-related, drought-related. That's got its own delays, congestion, price hikes associated with it. So there's already that problem going on in the Western Hemisphere. You bring it back over to the Eastern Hemisphere with the Suez Canal, and now the Suez Canal is essentially shut down. Like, it's not actually shut down. You can still go through it.
Yeah.
But for all intents and purposes, major shipping companies are treating it as though
It's a de facto closure of the canal.
Exactly,
Like,
exactly. Since January 12th, when the first of 3 U.S.-led military strikes began on Houthi land targets, more than 106 tankers have changed routes to avoid the area. And that was almost a month ago, so that number has assuredly gone up. The exodus from the Red Sea is really reflected when you look at the Suez Canal transits, because they're currently 54% below their historical average, and then 51% lower compared to the same time last year. So half. You're getting half the amount of ships that used to go through the Suez Canal to get to their destination. So if they're not going through the Suez Canal, where are they going? Well, you got to go all the way around Africa. You have to go completely around the Cape of Good Hope, which is a monumental undertaking compared to just going through the Suez Canal. You're not only adding a little bit of time or a little bit of distance, you're adding thousands of miles, and you're adding weeks.
Yeah, weeks.
You're adding
days.
weeks, considering if you're going from India to Russia, for example, what was a 22-day trip, 45 days now.
And not to mention the time that's added to the journey, but also the cost. So the cost would nearly double. Not only does it hit the steamship lines, but of course they're just going to pass that cost on to the customer, which is the shippers.
Sure.
That is how instances, geopolitical issues like this will eventually work their way through the supply chain. And if it lasts long enough, these companies can't just continue to absorb these costs. Saw this a lot during the COVID pandemic with the quadrupling of ocean rates and container rates. Eventually, these companies can't absorb the increases and will have to pass them along to their customer, which is why it's so important for people to stay in the know as far as what's going on in the world. I mean, we're a global society. You know, what happens around the world, you can't just say, well, that happened 5,000 miles away, it doesn't affect me. It does. We're a global society. We're all interconnected in one way or another. In a previous episode, I mentioned the Shanghai Containerized Freight Index. What that is it is a metric. It's based on averages, of course, but it takes Shanghai port in China, which is a major port. Exports from Shanghai go all over the world. But it takes rates out of Shanghai to pretty much every destination and averages them together. And it's a very good indicator of global trade trends, pricing trends in particular. What we see is, as we came off the pandemic a year ago, almost at this point, or more, the containerized index dropped back off, and we saw some stabilization over last summer up until the fall. So the first missile from the Houthis was fired at a commercial vessel. It was October 19th last year. And what we see is from that date, the Shanghai Containerized Freight Index increased 638 points from October 19th until today, actually. That's a 78% increase.
Yeah.
And again, that is directly correlated with containerized shipping rates. So rates have increased drastically, which is passed along from the steamship lines to the shippers. And eventually, like I mentioned, these shippers can't just absorb the cost. They'll eventually pass it on to their customers.
Yeah.
Something that you mentioned earlier, Grayson, off camera, was how shippers account for their shipping costs, not necessarily by the full container. And we used to do this when I was at an importer. We accounted for it shipping cost per item. If you had a container that fit 100 items in it, you would divide that cost, the total containerized cost, by the number of items you had in the container, and that would be your cost per piece. So you use this cost per piece to calculate your sunk cost and what it takes for you to get your product from the manufacturer to the retail shelf. This is how you calculate your margins and how companies make money at the end of the day. And a lot of companies, these margins are fairly thin. So when your shipping cost is, for easy math, let's call it $5 per piece, right? And your margin, you're making $10 theoretically. So we're making $10. Our shipping cost is $5 per piece. Well, when something like this happens and your shipping cost increases 78% based on the containerized freight index out of Shanghai, your shipping cost per piece goes up, and we're really creeping up on margins. So companies are making less money. And so eventually, once we hit that threshold, that margin threshold, you're going to start seeing the cost of goods increase as well.
Yeah, and that's really one of the biggest impacts that you're going to see is the ripple effect from it, obviously, with the freight rates as well. And then something that I think is related in a way is, well, what is it going to look like when it does start to blow over a little bit? When vessels do start going back through the Red Sea and through the Suez Canal? Well, you're likely to see, at least initially, a lot of port congestion, I would imagine, as you get this rush to either ship items that had been held for a while because they didn't want to deal with going around and the extra shipping costs, or you just have an off schedule because there are some ships that are still going around the Cape of Good Hope, some that are able to go through. There will be obviously some logistical challenges that you'll have to go through for sure. And obviously the consumer at the end of the day is going to feel that either in regards to having to pay more or just supply chain issues, not being able to get stuff.
Let's assume that this crisis ended today. Well, that doesn't mean that the fallout from it is going to end today too, because you still have all these ships that have transited around the tip of Africa, and it's going to take them weeks. So because it ends today, you're going to see the ship traffic not reach its destination for another week or two. So you'll see that port congestion lag a week or two afterwards. We actually saw the exact same thing a few years ago when the Suez Canal was blocked by a ship that beached itself across the canal.
I love how almost every episode we come back to that.
History tends to repeat itself, so we look at the lessons we've learned from the past and we can apply it in real time. So when the canal opened, when that ship was finally freed, it wasn't an overnight fix.
No.
You still had a myriad of ships that were waiting to transit Suez, both in the north at Port Said and in the south at the Red Sea. It took weeks for everything to work its way through.
It's like interstate traffic. You come up on a wreck, for example, and you're stuck in almost standstill traffic for a mile, but then you get up there and all of a sudden, there's not even a wreck. Well, it's because they had just cleaned it up maybe an hour or so before, but it takes a while for all the other cars to make their way through. Any sort of like rock that you throw into the pond to cause that ripple, it's going to keep going until eventually it calms down, but it doesn't just stop immediately.
Yeah, it is a perfect analogy, but it kind of segues us into what do we do? I mean, what can we do?
Yeah,
do we
other alternatives, for example.
And there certainly are alternatives. I mean, number one, shippers can just not ship. They can wait this out.
They can just stop,
Yeah, and that's
give up.
That, of course, is not
That's
the
what I
answer.
do. Whenever things are tough, I just give up.
Just give up.
Stop.
We're done. But, of course, that's not the answer. I mean, companies have orders to fill. They can't just not ship.
Yeah.
You can look at other avenues. As we've mentioned, during the pandemic again, and I keep going back to that, but it's just
the best analogy we got. It's the most.
It's a good example.
Yeah,
we learned a lot of things.
Exactly.
Then
It's
that
not
we
a
can
perfect
apply.
analogy of like what's going on right now, the pandemic, but it is. There are definitely aspects of it that we can take from and learn from, especially when it comes to like what we did with port congestion. And
there's lessons we learned during the pandemic that we can apply to other situations like now. So one, think outside the box. You don't always have to ship through the Suez Canal. We could ship other other methods. For instance, air freight has actually seen some increases. There's a lot of risk right now shipping through this area. Risk of piracy and cargo theft, risk of delays, freight damage, increased cost. One thing companies can consider is your transit time has, let's say it's doubled, and your cost of goods has, I won't say doubled, but has certainly increased significantly. So why pay more and wait longer when the cost to air freight, depending on what you have, it may justify getting your goods there sooner with less risk. I mean, air freight is undeniably more secure than ocean shipping. I don't have to make the argument that it's faster, because it is.
There's no sky pirates either.
Yeah, no, there's
not yet.
Very few and far between.
Yeah.
It is typically more expensive. That's just the nature of the beast. But when you see your ocean cost going up and your transit times going up, risk going up, it makes you think, well, the alternative is air freight. So we're seeing a lot more requests come through, imports and exports especially. So it's something that shippers can consider. And of course, we're happy to jump in and be a resource as well.
If you're shipping stuff, there's a pretty good chance, especially if you're importing stuff, that it's making its way through the Red Sea or through that area at some point or another. So this just kind of goes to show the global impact that it can have, not only as a political thing, but as a supply chain and economic thing as well. So it's worth keeping an eye on right now. Obviously, it's still ongoing. I wish that I could give you some sort of conclusion here. I love to wrap up videos with a nice little bow at the end of it, but I don't have one for this one, unfortunately.
So I guess what we're trying to say is this is just a perfect example that proves that just because you've done something one way forever doesn't mean it's the right way or the best way to do it. It may work in a perfect world, but the world's not perfect. It's ever changing, and you have to be able to pivot and be flexible to respond to scenarios like this, scenarios like the pandemic, scenarios like the ship blocking the Suez Canal, or the drought in Panama that is impeding ship traffic in the canal. All these things prove that you can't just rest on your laurels and assume, oh, we've done it this way forever, we're going to keep doing it that way. Importers, shippers have to think outside the box, have to be ready to be adaptive to all these ever-changing events in the world. Look for other options, and that's why we're here at KCH, to be your other option, your backup option. And if we're your current option, we certainly appreciate it. And we're going to be the ones that are thinking outside the box for you, presenting new ideas that you may not have thought of, and doing what we can to move your freight faster and cheaper and more efficiently than the competition.
If you guys want to reach out to us here at KCH, just check out the description. We have all of our social channels there. We got our website there. We have a newsletter there as well. We have pretty much all of the avenues for anything you need for supply chain industry, news or services. We do both. We like to keep you informed and actually help you out. Thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you on the next episode of Shifting Gears. See ya.
Thank you.